The mask you didn't know you were wearing there comes a moment quiet, unassuming when you pause in the middle of your life and realize you've been playing a role you never consciously agreed to. Everything looks normal from the outside. You have a job, relationships, responsibilities, a steady rhythm to your days. But deep within, something feels misaligned. Like you've been cast in a play without a script of your own, performing scenes that please everyone except the person you see in the mirror. This is not an accident. From the very beginning, you were handed cues what to say, how to act, what to believe. These cues came wrapped in love, in reward, in fear of rejection. You didn't question them because questioning them meant risking connection. And in a world where belonging often feels like survival, we learn early that fitting in matters more than being true. So you adjusted. You adapted. You wore the mask. It became so familiar you forgot it was a mask at all. It guided your choices, defined your success, shaped your dreams. But slowly, the cracks began to show. Moments of fatigue, of quiet dread, of restless dissatisfaction. You tried to fix it, more goals, more validation, more structure, but the feeling lingered. Because the problem was never your performance. It was that you've never allowed yourself to stop and ask, whose life am I really living? That question doesn't arrive as a lightning bolt. It sneaks in during long nights, early mornings, and empty celebrations. And once it appears, you can't unsee it. You start noticing how many of your beliefs aren't yours, how many of your decisions were made out of fear, how many of your sacrifices weren't choices but inheritances. This is the awakening. It's disorienting. It's painful. But it's also the beginning of something real. Because to live for yourself, you must first understand why you stopped in the first place. And to do that, we have to journey back to where the craving for approval first took root. 2. The roots of approval. Before you can break free, you have to understand the nature of the chains. And perhaps the most powerful one, the one that binds even the strongest minds, is the need to be approved of. It seems harmless on the surface. A compliment feels good. A nod of validation feels reassuring. But what begins as a desire to be accepted quietly mutates into a dependence on others for a sense of worth. This need is not weakness. It is ancient. In early human history, isolation meant danger. Belonging to a tribe wasn't emotional luxury. It was a matter of life or death. Rejection wasn't uncomfortable. It was fatal. And though we now live in cities instead of caves, that primal coding remains embedded in our nervous systems. It's why criticism can feel like a threat. Why being excluded triggers anxiety. Why we measure our value through the mirror of other people's eyes. From the moment we can walk, we're trained to perform for praise. A child is called good when they obey, smart when they please. Little by little, we learn that love is something to be earned by doing what's expected. And the more approval we get, the more we forget how to live without it. We internalize the voices of authority, parents, teachers, culture, and carry them into adulthood. They don't disappear. They become subconscious scripts. Scripts that whisper, be polite, don't be difficult, stay safe, choose the path that makes sense, even if it doesn't make sense to you. So you smile when you want to scream. You say yes when everything in you wants to say no. You pursue goals that feel hollow because the applause drowns out your own doubts. And you call it maturity. But it isn't. It's survival. And survival is not the same as living. The danger of approval seeking is that it offers just enough comfort to prevent change, just enough praise to keep you obedient. But comfort is not the same as peace. One numbs you, the other frees you. To truly reclaim your life, you must begin to recognize these inherited instincts, not with blame, but with awareness. Because awareness is the first crack in the armor. It's what allows you to ask the question that changes everything. What if the life I'm chasing was never mine to begin with? 3. Living the script you never wrote. Most people don't live lives. They live scripts. Carefully constructed outlines passed down through generations, refined by culture, reinforced by media, and performed with a convincing smile. These scripts come with titles: the good daughter, the responsible son, the successful adult, the admirable citizen, each with lines written long before you knew what you wanted. You didn't choose the plot. You were handed it. And because everyone around you was following the same one, you never thought to question it. Graduate, get a stable job, find a partner, buy a house, have children, retire. It all seemed inevitable, like gravity. To deviate felt dangerous. To question felt ungrateful. So you walked the path, step by step, applauded at each milestone, yet somehow more disconnected with every turn. You told yourself it was normal, that everyone feels this way. That emptiness is the price of adulthood. But what if it isn't? What if that ache you feel, the one that creeps in during the quiet moments, is not a flaw in you, but a clue? A signal that the life you're living doesn't match the person you are becoming? Scripts are powerful because they hide in plain sight. They look like wisdom. They sound like love. But if you listen closely, you'll notice something missing: your voice. When was the last time you did something simply because it felt right to you, not because it made sense to others? Not because it was expected, but because your soul whispered yes. The tragedy is not in following a script. It's in never realizing you had the right to rewrite it. And the longer you live a life that isn't truly yours, the harder it becomes to hear your own desires. They get quieter. They start to fade. Until one day, you wake up surrounded by everything you thought you wanted and wonder why you feel nothing at all. That is the moment most people either numb themselves further or finally begin to question. And if you're reading this, listening to this, thinking deeply about it, it means you're already beginning. But with that beginning comes an inevitable confrontation, the emotional cost of betraying your true self. 4. The pain of betraying yourself. There is a silent kind of suffering that doesn't leave bruises, but breaks something inside you each time you ignore it. It's the pain of saying yes when you mean no, of showing up for a life that feels more like a performance than a presence. It builds slowly, invisibly, beneath the surface of everyday decisions. And by the time it becomes unbearable, it has already taken root deep within you. You begin to notice it in small moments: the forced laugh at a joke that doesn't land, the heavy sigh before walking into a room that drains you, the quiet dread on Sunday nights that no amount of distraction can erase. These are not coincidences. They are signs, signals that you are living in misalignment with yourself. Psychologists call this cognitive dissonance, the discomfort that arises when your actions contradict your inner truth. But long before it becomes a psychological term, it is a spiritual wound. Because to betray yourself is to abandon the only home you'll ever truly have. And the more you do it, the harder it becomes to recognize yourself at all. Carl Jung described this as the loss of the self, to the persona, the mask we wear to be accepted. The mask that gets us approval, but costs us authenticity. And over time, that trade begins to show up not just in your emotions, but in your body. Fatigue, anxiety, a vague sense that you're running out of time but have no idea what you're racing toward. You try to fix it with vacations, promotions, lifestyle upgrades, but nothing sticks. Because you're not tired from doing too much. You're tired from doing too little of what matters. The world may see you as successful, even admirable. But when you are alone, away from the noise, there is no applause loud enough to drown out the sound of your own disappointment. This is where many people begin to break. But breaking is not the end. Sometimes it's the invitation. Because once you feel the pain of betraying yourself deeply enough, you are finally ready to stop pretending. But the moment you stop pretending, you also begin to see just how many illusions you've been living inside, including the illusion of a perfect life. 5. The illusion of a perfect life. There's a certain kind of perfection that looks flawless from the outside, but feels hollow from within. It's the curated life, the job that impresses, the partner that checks every box, the lifestyle that photographs well. It earns compliments, likes, admiration. But behind closed doors, it leaves you with a question no one else can answer. Why doesn't this make me feel alive? This is the illusion that traps so many: a life built for visibility, not vitality. You may have done everything right, followed every rule, achieved every milestone. Yet something feels missing, and the absence is louder than the applause. You wonder if you're ungrateful. You remind yourself how lucky you are. But the truth is, you're not broken. You're just living a life that was designed for validation, not fulfillment. The modern world has made performance the standard. Social media amplifies the need for approval, turning every meal, achievement, and relationship into a public display. But real life cannot be lived on a stage. Real joy is often quiet, unphotogenic, and deeply personal. It happens in moments no one else sees: when you're lost in something you love, when you're alone but not lonely, when you're honest without fear. But these moments are hard to access when you're always performing. The more you build a life around being seen, the harder it becomes to feel seen. And that disconnect grows until even the most beautiful life starts to feel like a burden. It's not that you failed. It's that the metrics were flawed. You were chasing someone else's version of happiness, never stopping to ask what your own might look like. And here's the hardest part. Undoing this illusion requires letting go. Letting go of the identity you built for others. Letting go of the applause. Letting go of the security that comes with predictability. But in that letting go, something new emerges. A space. A possibility. A question. What if you chose yourself, not the image of you, but the real you? And while that question is simple, the answer changes everything. Because the moment you choose yourself is the moment your real life begins. 6. What happens when you choose yourself? Choosing yourself is not an act of rebellion. It is an act of remembrance. A return to the voice you silenced, the instincts you doubted, the dreams you postponed because they didn't fit into someone else's map. At first, it feels unnatural, even selfish. After all, you were taught to accommodate, to be agreeable, to keep the peace. But peace built on self-denial is not peace, it's compliance. And the moment you begin living in alignment with your truth, you feel the shift. It's not dramatic. It's subtle. But it's unmistakable. The heaviness begins to lift. The anxiety loses its grip. You laugh and realize it's been a while since it felt that real. You start saying no to things that drain you, and yes to things that make no sense on paper, but make perfect sense to your soul. And the world responds. Some people support you. Some pull away. Some don't understand. But clarity does not need consensus. What you gain is not just freedom, it's presence. You stop running. You stop pretending. You begin to show up fully, even if your voice trembles, even if your path is uncertain. There's a strange kind of joy in this. Not the joy of constant happiness, but the joy of wholeness. You're no longer split between who you are and who you pretend to be. And with that wholeness comes energy that was once spent managing impressions now flows into creation, connection, growth. You notice beauty again. You feel alive in your own skin. And perhaps for the first time, you trust yourself to lead your own life. But this path isn't without cost. Choosing yourself often means disappointing others. And for those of us conditioned to please, this may be the hardest step of all. Because love, for many, has been confused with approval. And walking away from someone's expectations can feel like betrayal, even when it's an act of integrity. But this is the sacred tension every authentic life must navigate: the dance between being true to yourself and letting go of who you were supposed to be. 7. Disappointing others is a spiritual practice we are taught from a young age: that love means agreement, that connection requires compliance, that to belong we must bend. So we shrink ourselves to fit into relationships, roles, and reputations that offer safety in exchange for silence. But real love is not built on obedience. It is tested and strengthened by honesty. And honesty, when rooted in self-respect, will sometimes disappoint the people who love you. This is not a failure. It is a sacred friction. Because every time you honor your truth at the expense of someone's expectation, you are choosing alignment over approval. And that choice, while painful, is the birthplace of authenticity. There will be guilt. Not because you've done something wrong, but because you've broken an unspoken contract that you will always make others comfortable, even at your own expense. But guilt is not always a signal of wrongdoing. Sometimes it's a sign that you're finally rewriting a story that never belonged to you. You will feel fear. Fear of rejection, of being misunderstood, of losing people you care about. And sometimes you will lose them. Not because you were selfish, but because the version of you they loved was never the full truth. Letting go of that illusion is not betrayal. It is clarity. And in its wake, the people who remain the ones who truly see you will love you more deeply, not less. To disappoint others with integrity is to choose truth over comfort. It is to accept the price of freedom. And that price, while steep, is what allows you to stand tall in your own life. But this work cannot be done in noise. It requires silence, stillness, solitude. Because only in solitude do you hear the voice beneath the guilt, beneath the fear, beneath the noise, a voice that whispers not what others want from you, but who you truly are when no one is looking. 8. Loneliness vs. Solitude. There is a vast difference between being alone and being with yourself. Loneliness is the absence of others. Solitude is the presence of self. One feels empty, the other feels full. But in a world addicted to noise, solitude is often mistaken for isolation. We are constantly surrounded by people, by content, by distraction. And yet so many feel disconnected, not because they lack company, but because they've lost contact with their own essence. Solitude is where that contact is restored. It is not punishment. It is practice. The practice of listening inward, of sitting quietly with all that you've avoided, your fears, your longings, your truth. In solitude, there is no one to impress, no script to follow, no applause to seek. Just you. And that can be terrifying. Because without the roles you play, who are you? Without the noise of the world, what remains? These questions are not meant to break you. They are meant to bring you home. The greatest thinkers, artists, and visionaries in history knew this. They sought silence not because they rejected life, but because they wanted to live it more deeply. Friedrich Nietzsche wrote, "He who cannot be alone will never be free." Because freedom requires awareness, and awareness requires space. In solitude, you begin to see clearly what you've been carrying that was never yours. The expectations, the stories, the fears, and as they fall away, what's left is raw, unfiltered, true. This is where your inner compass begins to reawaken. You stop moving by default and start choosing with intention. Solitude doesn't make you less connected. It makes connection more honest. Because when you know yourself, you stop seeking others to complete you. You begin to meet them as equals, not as saviors. And in that shift, relationships become sacred, not necessary. But solitude also reveals something else: the weight of truth. Because the more you come home to yourself, the more you realize how far you've strayed. And that realization brings you face to face with the real cost of living authentically. 9. The price of authenticity. To live authentically is to walk a path with no guarantees, to speak words that may not be understood, to make choices that invite judgment. It is to risk being alone for the sake of being whole. And that risk, while noble in theory, is often brutal in practice. Because authenticity costs comfort. It costs predictability. It costs the illusion that you can be everything to everyone and still be true to yourself. The world does not reward truth with ease. It rarely applauds those who step outside the expected path. But ease was never the goal. The goal is aliveness. And aliveness demands risk. You will be questioned. You will be criticized. You may lose relationships built on who you pretended to be. But what you gain in return is worth everything. You gain alignment, a life where your outer world finally reflects your inner truth. You gain energy, the kind that returns when you no longer spend it managing impressions. You gain clarity, the ability to see where you end and others begin. And perhaps most importantly, you gain peace, not the passive kind that comes from avoiding conflict, but the powerful kind that comes from honoring your own soul. Authenticity asks everything of you. but it gives everything back. It doesn't guarantee success, but it gives meaning to your failures. It doesn't promise love, but it makes the love you receive real. It doesn't eliminate fear, but it teaches you how to walk beside it. This is not the easy life, but it is the honest one. And honesty, once tasted, is hard to forget. Because once you've lived even a single day as your full self, you can never again be satisfied with a life built on pretense. You know too much. You've seen what's possible. And with that knowing comes responsibility, the responsibility to never again betray your own voice, no matter how loud the world becomes. But before you can fully claim that life, there is one final realization you must face, one that changes everything and requires the most courageous act of all. 10. The only permission you'll ever need. No one is coming to give you permission. No one will arrive one morning with a map, a medal, or a moment where everything suddenly makes sense. The clarity you crave will not descend from the heavens. It will rise quietly from within the day you decide that your life belongs to you. This is the final realization. The one most people avoid because it strips away all excuses. It means you can no longer blame your past, your parents, your partner, or society for why you haven't lived fully. It means the weight and the wonder of your existence is now entirely in your hands. That kind of responsibility is not a burden, it's a liberation. Because if no one else has the power to define your worth, then no one else can take it away. If no one else can grant you purpose, then you are finally free to create your own. But freedom without action is just theory. It is not enough to know this truth. You must live it. Not once, not someday, but today, in the smallest ways that build the foundation of a life that is finally yours. Say no when you mean no. Speak when silence feels like betrayal. Walk away from what depletes you, even if it once defined you. Move slowly if you must, but move. Because waiting for the right moment is the surest way to miss your life entirely. And when the fear rises, and it will meet it with compassion, not retreat. Fear is not the enemy. Abandoning yourself is, the world may not understand. That's okay. It was never their job to understand your journey. It's yours. All of it. The doubts, the breakthroughs, the stumbles, the moments that make your chest ache with recognition. This is your becoming. And it will never be neat, but it will be real. So take the step. Not because it's easy, but because it's true. And if this message reached a place in you that you've been ignoring, maybe it's time to stop waiting. Maybe it's time to begin again, not with permission, but with conviction. If this spoke to you, share it with someone who needs to remember who they are. And if you're ready to reclaim your story, subscribe for more journeys like this. Your truth is waiting. And it begins with a single choice: to live for yourself.